Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that really touches everyone: how we navigate financial decisions. We often look for the right answers, don't we? But what if, maybe, the best approach comes from somewhere totally unexpected, like, say, medicine? Yeah, we've got some really fascinating material here for this deep dive. Excerpts from a text that, well, it promises to tie together key lessons for making better financial choices. So, our mission today is to unpack these insights for you. And we're going to focus particularly on this surprising historical story that really illustrates the dangers of just being told what to do, especially with your personal journey.
It's really compelling, actually, how this source kicks off with something that seems totally unrelated, an old anecdote. But it just perfectly sets the stage for this critical discussion about autonomy, about decision-making, and what it actually means to be well-informed, whether that's health or finance.
Okay, let's get into it then. Because to really get the author's point, we need to go back, way back, to 1931, and specifically to a dentist appointment that just went horribly tragically wrong. So, picture this. 1931. A man, Clarence Hughes, he's in agony, terrible toothache. He goes to the dentist. The dentist uses what they called back then crude anesthesia. So Clarence wakes up hours later. The toothache is gone, sure, but he finds out he's also missing 16 teeth. And kind of randomly, his tonsils are gone too.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the real tragedy hits. A week later, Clarence dies from complications. From that, extensive surgery he never actually asked for.
And you'd think, okay, medical malpractice lawsuit, right? But his wife's lawsuit wasn't really about that. It was about something, well, more fundamental: lack of consent. Her point wasn't that the surgery itself failed. I mean, that was a risk back then, a known risk. It was that Clarence never agreed to have 16 teeth pulled or his tonsils out, and probably wouldn't have if he'd been conscious and asked.
And the legal side of things in 1931, well, it was pretty murky on this. Consent wasn't exactly clear-cut. The case didn't really go anywhere. And one court ruling sort of summed up the thinking at the time. It said doctors needed, quote, freedom to make the best medical decisions.
Right.
And get this, it added, without such, we could not enjoy the advancement of science.
That ruling,
Yeah.
it really shows you the mindset, doesn't it? The historical medical thinking. For like most of history, the doctor's job was just seen as fix the patient. Simple as that. What the patient actually thought about the treatment. Often totally irrelevant. And, it wasn't necessarily doctors being arrogant or malicious. It came from this really deep belief in two things. First, every patient wants to be cured. Okay, seems reasonable. And second, there is a universal and right way to cure them. Now, if you truly believe both those things, then minimizing patient consent, well, it actually follows a certain, albeit strange logic. Sounds jarring now, but back then.
But that's obviously not how medicine works today, thankfully. And the source material we're looking at uses this shift beautifully. There's been this maybe subtle but really profound change in medical schools over the last, say, 50 years. They've moved from just treating the disease toward treating the patient. And that means something fundamental changed. Doctors started laying out the options, explaining the choices. And then, this is the key part, letting the patient decide which way to go.
Yeah, and that massive shift was driven by a few things. New patient protection laws played a part for sure, but also the really influential work of a Dr. J. Katz. Katz argued very powerfully that patients, well, they have wildly different views about what's worth it in medicine. What's an acceptable risk for you might be totally unacceptable for someone else, right? Different values, different life situations. So their beliefs, their personal context, it has to be part of the decision.
Yeah, Katz had this quote. It's really powerful, gets right to the core of it. He said, "It is dangerous nonsense to assert that physicians can rely on their benevolent intentions, their abilities to judge what is the right thing to do. It is not that easy. Medicine is a complex profession, and the interactions between physicians and patients are also complex." That last bit. Interactions between physicians and patients are also complex. That feels incredibly important, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's not just the science.
Right. It's the human element.
Exactly. It means even if a doctor means well, their judgment can't just override the patient's autonomy, because only the patient really knows what's worth it for them. And this wisdom from medicine, this focus on the individual, it maps so perfectly onto financial advice. Just like a good modern doctor doesn't just dictate treatment, the author of our source material says, look, I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do with your money. They explicitly avoid treating you like that dentist treated Clarence Hughes.
And that distinction is just Crucial. It's not saying doctors or financial advisors are useless now. Not at all.
Yeah.
They have huge amounts of knowledge. They know the odds. They know what generally works for most people most of the time. But at the end of the day, you, the individual, you have to decide what's right for your specific, unique situation.
Hmm.
Like our source says, there are universal truths in money, sure, but people will apply them differently. And they should apply them differently, based on their own goals, their values, their circumstances.
Okay, so with that kind of groundwork laid, this idea of autonomy and context, our source then gives us a series of short recommendations,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not rules, not prescriptions. Think of them more like guideposts, really helpful ones. They're designed to help you navigate your financial life, respecting all that complexity we just talked about. Just like a good doctor helps you choose your treatment.
Right. So let's dive into these guideposts. The first one that really jumped out at me, and maybe it sounds a bit, I don't know, counterintuitive, it's humility and forgiveness. The author says you need to really make an effort to find humility when things go right and offer forgiveness or compassion when they go wrong, because they say it's never as good or as bad as it looks.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, being nice to yourself, although that's part of it. It's about really understanding that outcomes, well, they're a mix, aren't they? Your effort, your skill, sure, but also just chance, randomness,
Yeah.
luck, and risk. So things go well. Okay, maybe it wasn't all you. Things go badly. Probably not entirely your fault either. Understanding that helps you avoid getting overconfident when you win and beating yourself up too much when you lose, which is, essential for staying sane long term.
That's such a critical point. It changes how you judge yourself, sure, but also how you judge others and who you pick as role models.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads into another big one, less ego, more wealth. The author puts it bluntly, saving money is the gap between your ego and your income. What do you make of that?
Oh, it's spot on. Because wealth itself, often it's the money you don't spend. It's built by resisting the urge to buy something today so you have more options or more security later on. We tend to think wealth is the fancy car, the big house, the stuff we see.
Yeah, the visible stuff.
Exactly. But true wealth is often quiet,
Yeah.
invisible. It's accumulated savings, investments. It's about delaying gratification, prioritizing the future over showing off now. It doesn't matter how much you earn, really. If you can't manage that gap between your income and your ego, you won't build lasting wealth.
That really drives it home. Wealth isn't just a number, it's a behavior, a mindset. And speaking of mindset, here's a great guidepost. Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night, which is very different from just saying get the absolute highest returns possible, isn't it?
Totally different, yeah. A lot of finance advice focuses purely on maximizing returns.
Yeah.
But this source suggests that prioritizing your peace of mind,
Right.
that might actually be the best universal guidepost for everyone. It just acknowledges that we're all different. Different risk tolerance, different life stages, different emotional reactions to money swings. If your financial plan keeps you up at night, worrying constantly, even if it looks great on paper, it's probably not the right plan for you.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to treating the patient, not just the numbers.
Makes perfect sense. Your finances should support your life, not cause constant stress. Okay, and for investors specifically, the author highlights the single most powerful tool they have, increase your time horizon.
Time. It really is the magic ingredient in investing, isn't it? It lets compounding work its wonders, turning small amounts into bigger ones. And just as importantly, it smooths out the bumps. Big mistakes. They tend to fade in importance over decades. Market crashes. You have time to recover. The longer you stay invested, the more your results tend to move closer towards what people deserve, meaning closer to the market's long-term average growth. It irons out the volatility.
Gives good decisions time to pay off and bad ones less impact.
Exactly.
Which is a nice segue to another key piece of advice. Be okay with a lot of things going wrong. The source says you can actually be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. How does that work?
Well, it's because in finance, especially in investing, outcomes aren't evenly distributed.
Mm-hmm.
It's often what they call a power law or Pareto principle. A small number of things drive the majority of the results. Think about venture capital.
Right, they expect most investments to fail.
Yeah, they might have tons of investments that go nowhere or even lose money,
Mm-hmm.
but one or two huge winners, Google and Amazon, can make the entire portfolio incredibly successful. So the lesson is, judge your overall performance, your full portfolio, not individual bets. Fixating on single stocks or single decisions can lead you astray. You might ditch a strategy too soon or think one lucky pick makes you a genius.
It's about the overall average and surviving the inevitable losers to benefit from the big winners.
Precisely. You have to endure the bad to capture the good.
Enduring. That connects perfectly to the next idea. Worship room for error, this gap between what could happen
Yeah.
and what you need to happen. That's how you endure, right?
It's such a crucial concept, and maybe a bit counterintuitive again. Our instinct is often to push things to the limit, optimize everything for maximum gain.
Yeah, squeeze out every last drop.
This guidepost says, no, hold back a bit. Build in a buffer, room for error, having savings beyond your immediate needs, not being fully leveraged. Having flexibility might look like you're being too conservative, like a hedge that costs you potential gains. But it's what keeps you in the game when the unexpected happens. A job loss, a market crash, a global pandemic, whatever life throws at you. And staying in the game is how you let that compounding magic happen over the long run.
Yeah.
So that buffer pays for itself many, many times over. It's not just caution, it's strategic endurance.
I love that framing. Endurance, not just caution. It changes how you think about it. Okay, and then the author wraps up with a couple of ideas that bring it right back to that personal context we started with. Define your game and respect the mess.
Yeah, these are so important for navigating the real world of money. Define your game means understanding your goals, your time horizon, your risk tolerance, and crucially, making sure your actions are not being influenced by people playing a different game.
Oh, that's huge today with social media and everything, seeing people flashing cash or hyping stocks.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in what others are doing. FOMO, right?
Yeah.
Fear of missing out. But if that person is, say, a day trader playing with money they can afford to lose, you're saving for retirement in 20 years. You're playing totally different games. Following their moves could be disastrous for you.
Right. You need blinders, almost. Focus on your own path.
And then respect the mess. This acknowledges that even smart, well-informed, reasonable people can look at the same financial situation and come to completely different conclusions.
Why?
Because, as the source says, people have vastly different goals and desires. What's right for one person is wrong for another. So, there often isn't one single right answer in finance. Accepting that messiness leads to less judgment, both of others and yourself, and probably more effective playing for your own situation.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really, really illuminating deep dive. It shows the financial wisdom. It's not just about the numbers, is it? It's so deeply tied into understanding ourselves, human behavior, our values, even these big historical shifts in how experts think.
Absolutely. And if you connect it all back, that journey in medicine, from a doctor just telling a passive patient what to do to a doctor collaborating with an informed patient, that journey really mirrors the path we should be taking in finance. It's about knowing the general principles, the universal truths, sure, but always, always applying them with a deep respect for your own individual context, your own specific goals.
Which brings us nicely to our final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. In this world that's just overflowing with financial advice, how do you actively, consciously define the game you're playing? And how do you make sure your decisions truly line up with your goals, your desires as they are now and as they might change, rather than just following someone else's playbook?
And building on that, maybe ask yourself this: how can you intentionally cultivate that room for error in your own financial life? Not seeing it as, just being overly cautious or missing out, but embracing it as the actual foundation. The thing that gives you endurance, the thing that lets that long-term compounding magic truly work for you.
Lots to think about there. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging for those insights.